I'd like to give a warm welcome to all of our participants. My name is Chris McGahey. I've been involved in the global water sector for 30 years, and it's a particular treat for me to work with the people that you'll meet today, because bringing new people into the water sector and raising awareness on the current global water crisis is an important part of my work right now. This particular panel discussion will examine how film can be a tool to raise awareness about the global water crisis that affects us all via a look at a film, Into Dust, the latest film from Oscar-winning director Orlando von Einsiedel, which tells the true story of Perween Rahman, a woman who worked tirelessly to protect the rights of Pakistan's poor and paid the ultimate price, set against the backdrop of the global water crisis. During this panel, we'll hear particularly from Aquila Ismail, sister of Perween and chairperson of the Orangi Pilot Project based in Karachi, Pakistan, and Becky Lichtenfeld, an Impact Strategist and Advisor for the film. And we hope that you've had a chance to view the film in advance of this session, but it's not critical that you have. I'd like to extend very warm greetings to all our attendees from around the world. And I want to say just a few words about using film in my work over time. But before that, I want to just tell you, we have two very, very powerful panelists. Becky and Aquila are incredibly strong people. We had a conversation with Aquila earlier this week, and she said very clearly, no topics are off limits. There's a lot of sensitivities around what she's been through, and we're enormously happy to have her with us. Globally, in my 3 decades of international water work, we regularly use film at the local level to engage audiences and provide evidence and stories to guide viewers toward a particular goal. These are usually made to unilaterally communicate as part of a program of information and influence. Sometimes there's a storyline and sometimes there are actors. Sometimes I use film to help community leaders speak to those in power who might be distant. This has become particularly important during the pandemic. And there have been many films that have been made that are warning us about an upcoming global crisis, even though this crisis is now. And what we have in Into Dust is different. This is a truth and a window into one aspect of the quiet power plays that are made around the control of water for profit and diverted gain. And it's not just for teaching, but to open eyes to this one tragic case, this one tragic event that's not limited to just this instance. So at this time, let's turn to our panelists for their thoughts on why they've chosen to be involved with film, and particularly this film. And I'll start with Aquila. You have a history of being a diligent practitioner. You're in the field, you're on the ground with communities, you're on the ground every day. What do you see as the role of film, and particularly this film, in helping your efforts?
So, I only came into it after Perween was killed. I was not a development practitioner. I'm an electrical engineer when I was an associate professor in the university. But I was always associated with the project because it was like a family matter with Perween being, and she used to bring everyone in. And I used to do a lot of documentation for her. So I mean, as a teacher, as a practitioner now, I feel that we need to empower people by giving them knowledge. Our work is totally knowledge-based advocacy. We create a set of knowledge depending upon what is on the ground, and then creating a template of development by dialoguing with those people and asking them what is it that they want and what is it that they're doing to overcome the shortcomings in their lanes, in their community. So, we are constantly learning, which is why we have to constantly use tools of learning. After 42 years, we still call ourselves a pilot project, which means we continue to learn, we continue to teach. And in teaching, we found that in the beginning, we used to use printed pamphlets, which we used to give out to people after listening to them and after asking them, how is it that you want this solved? And at that time, since there was not much technology available, especially in the lower income settlements, so that piece of script of paper that we would give them was very, very effective. Then as time progressed, Perween began to use a lot of film, in the sense that she used to record her thoughts, record what she wanted to do, what she wanted the young people to do, what is the training they needed to take. And then she found that if she sort of showed this to them, then there was a greater understanding, because I think more faculties are involved when you are talking about, when you're looking at a film. Also remember that just writing it down is not enough. I mean, all of history tells us that, there are novels and fictions which actually are true history, but it is the films which bring it to life. So when we brought these things to life, even, just recently what happened is, in 2019, there were huge, due to climate change, there was cloudbursts, and we had a much larger amount of rainfall than we usually do, which resulted in the flooding of the city. Literally, the whole of the city was flooded. So at that time, there is an interview of hers, which then began to surface, of her talking about the solutions to preventing flooding. And it got on, it became viral. And it was that piece of her talking about the ideas and bringing out maps and showing it to people, which caused many people to arrive at a solution. So we thought, okay, this is what we must do, and that is introduce community voices and also add our own, because we do have an ethos with which we approach development, and which is always of remembering, of respecting what the people are doing, and then helping them to do it in a more professional, in a better manner. So we've started to use documentaries, we've started to use clips, we've started to use interviews to bring home to the, in a more vivid manner, rather than just reading. And of course, the young people are so used to the YouTube, and they love it. They just think if something is on YouTube, it must be much, much truer than if we give them a piece of paper, or if we just talk to them. Talking is so ephemeral, I mean, it just vanishes. So when this idea of this film came about, when Harry and Orlando and we sat down and we discussed this, so we thought, okay, we must not just talk about what killed Perween. I mean, because she was killed because she documented what the mafia was doing. She actually quantified what was being done by the mafia in stealing water and land. Both of these are natural resources which belong to the people, but it was being taken away from them by the powerful, the influential, as it happens all over the world. So we said that we must talk about justice and justice the term that came around is water justice, because what our OPP and what Perween was about was equal opportunities and equal equitable distribution of the natural resource, primarily it being water. So so this came about, and when we talked about the film, we thought that we must also bring into the film the processes that we use, that OPP uses, that Perween introduced, that Perween honed to perfection. We're just still learning, how she did it, in order to get this advocacy, which was based on documentation, which was based on knowledge, which was to tell people, okay, look, this is what you already have, this is what you probably should do, and not what you have to do. And this was based on the development they wanted, not what somebody told them that they needed. So there is a constant process of dialogue which we wanted this film to bring out. Okay, yes, it takes longer, but it is so much more longer lasting. and it is so much more solidly embedded in the community. And we work in informal settlements all over Pakistan. And when we started in Orangi, this was an informal settlement of immigrants who had come in from Bangladesh when East Pakistan became Bangladesh, and some economic immigrants from up north. And they lived in the most, you can't even imagine the filth that was there. The lanes were dirty, the children were constantly sick, men had to lose work time. Women were the worst sufferers in this because they had to look after the health of their family and their own. And so was introduced the concept of a people-government partnership in which people did their share and the government did its share. Because once the people invested in terms of knowledge, in terms of money, and they were able to invest in terms of money because Orangi Pilot Project created low-cost models to create sanitation, to create waste disposal, to get water into the lanes, etc. So they were able to do it on their own. And when they invest, they are supremely empowered. You see, because they are then given a seat at the table by the government. They can demand, okay, look, we have made this investment, now you do your share. So we started to call it component sharing. You share components of development. This still holds true for all our programs. But what we are most concerned with is this fact that there has to be a perfect people-government partnership. It should not be a government partnership with IFIs or with the World Bank. It should be a partnership with the government, where the government recognizes what the people are doing and then puts in its bit. Because there are many things that the people cannot, even if they collect money over years, they cannot do it. For example, treatment plants, for example, big water reservoirs, pumping stations, people can't do it. They can lay the lines, but even laying the lines means investing. And for the government, actually, they say it is 70% of the investment. So the government was very happy to help. Now, a settlement, an informal settlement, which in 1980 consisted of 0.8 million people, is now a thriving formal settlement of 2.3 million people. And these are upwardly mobile people who, because of the clean environment, they've been able to now work at economic solutions. They've been able to get educated. And what excites us the most is that with the money saved from what they used to spend on health, it's the girls who are getting educated. And most schools are run by women in the settlements. So, and we feel very strongly that development at the local level, at the community level, is driven by women.
And it's wonderful what you said about the years that the Orangi Pilot Project has been running. As I think you and I had talked about before, in my 30 years, I learned about Orangi Pilot Project back in the 1990s. And it's just very remarkable that an organization like yours has it kept going. So Becky, you can see that Aquila and I have really come to this from the practitioner and the sort of international development world. You're coming from a very different place. You're a human rights advocate. You're a producer. You're an impact strategist. You've created and executed creative advocacy projects with filmmakers, artists, heads of state, organizers from around the globe. What are you doing with us today? What is it that brought you to this film and this story as an impact strategist?
Well, it's a definite group effort. So there's a whole team of us working on the strategy for this, but mostly it was Aquila and Perween's story, truthfully. Coming from a human rights background, I worked in an organization for many years where we trained and worked with human rights defenders to use video and film as a tool in their work. And so my inspiration always comes from those on the ground who are doing the work, who understand the situation and understand the solution. So if there's a way to help amplify, with their guidance of where the messages need to go and who needs to hear it for change to happen, then that's a really it feels like an opportunity to do amazing work with people that I can be inspired by and learn from. So firstly, it's really that these are incredible. It's not just about Perween, but it's about sisterhood. It's about community advocacy. Also, water is in everything we do. So it affects global health, it affects education, it affects private sector, civil society. So I can't think of anything more pressing that sort of intersects in our lives than water. And also the filmmaker, Orlando, I've worked with in the past, and he is an incredible storyteller. And so this felt like a wonderful opportunity to try to work alongside OPP and Aquila and figure out, and the Red Owl team who is working on the impact here, and Samia Khan, and an amazing group of people to try to amplify this the issues that rise up from the film. What
are yours and the impact team's goals with this film?
Yeah, thank you. That's the question we always want. I mean, our hope is to really use the film to support Perween's legacy and other community advocates around the world. We really want to address issues of water insecurity, and particularly solutions at the community, national, really an international level. Yeah, we want to promote good governance. We want this to be used as a tool by governments who are investing in infrastructure around equal access and water justice. And we hope it could serve as an inspiration around empowerment. And also really, we've through experts like you, Chris, who have advised us so much, and Aquila, we've learned that it's going to take so many different sectors to come together to address this issue of water insecurity around the world. So if it can be a convening tool to bring together private sector, people that wouldn't normally sit together at the same table, and also to bring the voice of the most marginalized to the table, as well, those are directly impacted, then hopefully we will have accomplished some of our goals.
Thanks for that. That puts the film into a nice broader global context. Let's bring it down locally again. Aquila, you're currently in Karachi, Pakistan. Karachi, Pakistan has been insufferably hot recently. You've also had flooding, and you have flooding going on now. You've had flooding in the past year. You're being affected by climate change broadly. Tell us your thoughts on the connections between the incredible heat you're experiencing, the effects that it's having on the urban low-income communities where you're working, and the importance of water, and what Perween did at this particular time in the communities where you work.
So let's start with when Perween documented water, and she released it to the world to see. A lot of changes were made because primarily she said, okay, we probably have enough water for the city, but it is being inequitably distributed, which means the poor are getting no water and the rich are getting too much water, which they waste while watering their lawns and washing their cars, etc. So, the documentation and its release to the public did embarrass the government, the local government, and changes began to take place. So that did happen. And then as far as the heat and the rain, the immense rain that we're having, in 2015, we experienced this terrible heat wave. Karachi is only hot for 2 months, for May and October. The rest of the time, it's moderate and mild. But that year, there were huge numbers of people who were affected, especially in the low-income communities, because they didn't have tools. They didn't have enough water. They didn't have air conditioning, for example. They didn't have proper housing in order to protect themselves. So what we did at that time was, in fact, I also landed up in hospital in 2015 with the heat stroke. But what we did was we looked around and we saw that the majority of the people who were affected by the heat were living in homes with tin roofs. Tin roofs meant that there was no radiation, all the heat came into the room. So we went about looking for a very simple, quick solution for this. So, and the quick solution was that we place a false ceiling under the tin roof. And because, changing the roof into something like tier girder, etc., would entail a lot of cost. So if we put even a canvas false ceiling with air passing through, that mitigated the problem. And we started by telling the families and by providing and facilitating the families to do one room in the beginning, so that everyone could sleep in that room or make that a living room. They're usually 2-room houses anyways. So that happened in 2015. And then in 2019, 2020, and 2021 now, we have, we have cloudbursts and we have huge quantities of water coming. And, it broken all records. In all my years, since 1972 to now of Karachi, it has never been like this. But here too, the primary problem was that there was no means of getting the water out of the city, getting the water into the sea, because of this wanton development that took place. Now, Karachi is drained by 46 natural channels. And now these natural channels, many of them were encroached upon, which either decreased their width or it completely blocked the flow of water. So, this was documented. Again, we do not get into anything until we have the perfect documentation, and we have teams which do it.
And so what you've really done, it sounds like, is you have populations who are living in this climate crisis. You've been able to do some small, very household level mitigation efforts to really help communities out, but you're still a victim of this larger climate crisis.
But we still haven't been able to mitigate the floods. We haven't been able to mitigate the floods because it involves a lot of evictions, which we are against. It involves a lot of demolition. And you must remember that the rich have encroached it more than the poor, but it is the poor whose homes are being demolished. So, we have a dilemma here. Okay, what do we do? And we try to balance. And always remember, the solutions start locally and then they go global. And as we talked earlier, that if there are 10 different locations which need development activity, then there are 10 different templates that we have to follow. It's not that one template is covering everything. It can't. So this is the thing that is lacking in the global development world.
Can you say something about in your communities, globally, women are most affected by water. Have there been particular issues that have been raised with the heat, with the water shortages that particularly address women? And then a question that's been nagging at me, Becky, that I'd like you to talk about is this film about women? Is this film about water? So let's hear a little bit about the direct effects on women in Karachi. And then if Becky, you can talk about that larger issue of thoughts that went into the film to address these kinds of issues. Aquila, what are some of the particular issues that have impacted on women around water and the climate issues?
Well, lack of water, or if you have to wait 20 days to get water in your pipes, what are women to do? They're supposed to, keep the environment clean. They're supposed to look after their kids' health. They can't do that. So one of the ways was, it mitigated it, the documentation and its eventual coming out into the world. That did help. But now what we do, and we've always done this, is to invite people to make their own water distribution systems, and to make it low cost, and where the lane becomes the unit of organization. And guess who drives the lane? Who mobilizes the people? It's the women, because the men argue, they want power. Everyone wants to be the leader, but it is the women who understand, we have to do this for the community. And, even in 1982, when OPP began, when Perween began working on sanitation, and in 1985, the first lane was mobilized. The lane manager, the lane leader was a woman. She said, all of you stop. We need this and you better cough up the money. And she handled the money and she handled all the mobilizing. So even today, women are the largest part of our work. They are the ones we mobilize first. And being women, a women-led organization helps, that really helps because we can go into their homes, we can talk to them. So, and then also we link up our work on water and sanitation with our health program, which is also run. We have home health centers, etc., where we again are working with groups of women and women from the community. And these groups of women then become leaders, And Perween would always say that whenever we train a man, whenever we create an organization with a man, he does it to attain power. But when we do it with women, they do it for their families and then for their communities, because they know that my family cannot be saved, my family cannot get the best until the community is done. And so this first lane manager then talked to her relatives living in 3 lanes down, and that lane also was mobilized. So it began with women, it continues with women, and women are the most effective.
And that leads to my question to you, Becky. You entered with this film into a very complex set of issues around the global water crisis. And in a 40-minute film, you touched on many of them. On viewing the film, I did have that question. Is the film about water? Is the film about women? And what thought went into that? Give us your ideas from the film producers, the film creators, how you knew the issues that Aquila was talking about and built them into the film.
Right. Well, I mean, the film is about all of those things. And it's not just Aquila and Perween's story. I mean, one of the beautiful things about this is that this is sort of a window into a global story all over the world about community advocates and about water, even though it affects us differently in different contexts in different places. If I live in Brooklyn, it's different how, I might be affected by water scarcity than it does in Flint, Michigan, or than it does in Karachi, but it is about all those things. And also just to take us back to the film piece itself, Aquila talks about documentation, and the documentation Perween was doing and OPP does. And this is the film, the power of a film is a different sort of documentation. It enables those voices of Perween and Aquila to reach an audience that may not have heard their story, that might not understand it in that particular context. Film has this unique ability to sort of take something and really go deep, right, over a certain period of time, and to illuminate things in a way where people might think differently than they have before, and to also bring those voices out to people who might not have heard those voices before. And I think who can't relate? I mean, this is what the tragedy of Perween, but the absolute bravery and commitment and the inspiration to be someone like Perween and Aquila, who returns and has been working and fighting for justice for so long, but also to keep the work going, that like Perween's dream. So I think the film, if we're able to highlight the voices of experts on the ground doing this work and highlight their legacy, both of them, because this is about sisterhood, it's about advocacy, it's about empowerment. And it does, Aquila touched upon it, but lack of access to clean water claims more lives each year than many diseases combined and conflicts, and women and girls having to walk very far, to access water. There's so many ways in which then less time for education, less time for, how they could be other ways of being useful in their community. So gender, obviously the gender lens here is deep. I hope that helps answer the question.
Sure. And I want to remind the people who are in attendance, we are accepting questions and we'll try and answer them. We have a little over 10 minutes left. And so please do take advantage of the Q&A box or the chat screen to send in your questions you might have that you'd like to address to either Aquila or to Becky. And while we're doing that, Aquila, I believe that the film itself, the story in the film ended about 3 years ago. And it ended on a remarkably and notably positive note in the impacts that you were having on the young people in the program, keeping that program running. Can you say a little bit about what's happened since the end of that film, particularly around water issues in the communities where Orangi Pilot Project works, and who some of those people are that have filled the seats in your workshops and your lessons and your contribution to the University Youth Training Initiative?
Yep. So this again, this training initiative was again set up by Perween some years before she was killed. And she said, okay, you know, we need to, and many of these young people did not know what to do for their community. So she started a course called Community Architects, you know, where she began to teach people how to draw maps, how to create designs for sanitation and water, etc. So we expanded on that, and she expanded on it. Now, many of those people you saw in the film, many of those young men and women, these particular women were from the polytechnics around Orangi itself. But we teach our methods, and we do courses on community-based development studies for universities in Karachi and outside Karachi as well. So whichever university has a department of development studies or architecture, they come to us, and we take these, we give these students 6-week courses twice a week, 3 hours each. And you know, there's always a long line waiting to join, which means they do, and you know, they may not use it to earn money, but they do use it to look at the communities. They do use it to look at their own localities. It doesn't mean that everybody comes from low-income settlements. They come from middle-income settlements. They even come from richer neighborhoods. But in all these cases, what we emphasize is that whatever it is you do not usurp anyone's rights. You know, make sure that there is an equitable distribution of natural resources, that everyone has access to it. And above all, be fair, be ethical, and be aesthetically, streamlined. Okay, you know that this is wrong and this is right. And if you can create that ethic, if you can create that, then that is the ethos of Perween, that is the ethos of the Orangi Pilot Project, that there has to be no usurpation of rights, there has to be equitable distribution of all natural resources, which includes land. Now that was another issue which she started to do. And we believe that might also have led to her being killed, because they saw how successful she was with the documentation of water. And they said, if she starts to do this, to do documentation of land, they are going to really be big losers. And remember this, that whether if you're a water mafia, you're also a land mafia. They're all equal opportunity thugs. So, you know, but they'll go wherever the money is. So when the money was on water, they did water, which was stopped. And then they went on land because of the war economy, etc. Land became precious, so they shifted to that. And then when she started to document that, that was a bit too much for them. And the person who we think, who is the principal accused in our case, and there are 5 people behind bars, this guy used to have an illegal hydrant, and then he also usurped land. In fact, he tried to take over the land on which our office exists, and he lives right in front of our office. So, you know, these people, and they could not accept that here was this girl. They called her a girl, although she was 50 years old. They said, this woman, this girl, she challenges us. How dare she challenge us? And you know, I was recently in the court where his confession was being read out. And in 10 different places, he said that this woman humiliated us by challenging us. So, you know, this is the thing, you know, you have to resist, you have to challenge. And coming to the young people, it's always, we run these courses throughout the year, and we facilitate it, and we take them into the community, into Orangi mostly, because that's where we are based, and we teach them how to look at development, much like we teach the community people to look at development. That go in with an open mind, look at what's there, what they need to do, and then come up with solutions which the people can do themselves.
And
So this is
yeah, and Aquila, among our participants, we obviously have some very, very good thinkers. One of the common questions we've been getting is, how can we, as individuals, best carry forward Perween's vision and her accomplishments? What would you say that individuals are always looking for things to do in this very, very confusing world? How would you answer that question? And then Becky, I would come to you in the same way from the perspective of your advocacy and campaign. So Aquila, what could individuals do that would carry forward Perween's vision?
the thing is that, Perween was an architect, and not everyone would be an architect. But Perween's message and Perween's legacy is that whatever it is you do, whether you do medicine, whether you do fashion designing or whatever you do, make sure that everyone in your region of influence is treated equally, is treated with justice, and give justice to trees, to nature, to humanity, to the disabled, to children, to cats. She loved cats and dogs. And we have a menagerie in the office of all rescue cats and dogs. She used to have 13 cats in the house when she was killed. And she used to rescue black cats because black cats are taboo in our culture. They're supposed to bring bad luck, but she was the one who introduced black cats into many, many, many families. So the message is always that whatever it is you do it ethically. Do it in your sphere of influence. You don't have to be go into an informal settlement or into a poor settlement, but that always means you go beyond yourself. Go beyond yourself and think of others, and not just think of others is so cliched, but do things in your own life that that do not harm others, especially it does not harm nature, and do not ever lose hope. There is much to be disappointed in. There is much to be desperate about. There's so much abuse. There's so much oppression, but there are people who are trying to overcome these, and you have to look at these people and get your inspiration from them, and never lose hope. There is a lot of cause for desperation maybe, but there's absolutely no reason for despondency.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Aquila, and watch over me as we both go forward to make sure that I'm in a good place with that legacy.
Okay.
Becky, in terms of the film and where you're going with a campaign, what can individuals do to carry forward Perween's vision in the context of where you and the film advocates are going?
Well, first, I just have to say, Aquila is really an inspiration. And so we can all continue to hear what she has to say and learn from her wisdom, because that's sort of our guiding principle here, and really the heart of this whole project. But we are using the film as just sort of a place to really support the experts on the ground doing this work. So I would really hope that people can share the film and the resources on our website, which have been shared in the chat. Try to understand how water reaches your home, if it does. And if it doesn't, then you already understand how grave the situation is.
Understand why it doesn't reach your home.
Exactly. Too. And those are the people that need to be part of the solutions, and be part of the conversation as to the infrastructure and how to help that situation. Understand what you're here. Let's say I'm talking to perhaps an audience here in the United States. What are your elected officials doing? This can be in other places too, in relation to climate and how that intersects with your own life. Vote accordingly, listen to the voices of those who are doing this work, follow community-led organizations, learn from the organizations that we're partnered with. All of that information is on our site. We have a brilliant campaign advisors such as yourself, Chris, who have been helping us. But, you know, people really talk about this is something that's happening in the future. This is not happening in the future. Water scarcity is happening right now, wherever you are. And you might not understand the direct impact because you can turn on the faucet here in Brooklyn, but we are all directly affected, and climate is exacerbating an already tenuous situation. So we would hope you would connect with us, look at our resources, host a screening, and sign up for our newsletter. We're going to be doing lots of events and interesting things, and working with Aquila. There'll be a premiere hopefully in Pakistan in the fall. So just stay in touch with us.
And there are multiple sources that Becky mentioned that are in the chat about how to host a showing of the film, a civil society screening guide. So there's a lot of information that is in the chat with links there. I would go back to where I was 45 minutes ago in starting this and telling you that we have incredibly powerful women. I think you've gotten to know both of them here. I think Perween is also with us. And with that,
Yes.
I want to thank everyone for attending. And I hope that you'll follow those links, make contact with Becky and Aquila. And thank you very, very much for choosing to attend. Thanks, Becky, and thanks, Aquila.
Thank you, Aquila. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.